Hello, thanks for joining us today. It's to Johnny Hallyday, the Elvis Presley of France, who's died at the age of 74. 6 decades of performing, more than 100 million records sold, and 1,000 songs. Today, France is in mourning. He kept audiences enthralled for nearly 60 years with his interpretations of American rock and roll and his turbulent offstage life. Johnny Hallyday, the French answer to Elvis Presley, has died. He was 74. Although he was little known outside France, the icon sold more than 100 million records, acted in more than 30 films, and appeared on the cover of Paris Match more than 80 times. In a moment, we'll speak to our critics about his impact on French culture. But first, a look back at his career.
He was considered the French Elvis. Johnny Hallyday was one of France's most loved performers. His career spanned a half-century during which he sold more than 100 million records. Born Jean-Philippe Smet, he appeared on French television in 1960. He was only 17. He had his first hit shortly afterwards, Souvenir, Souvenir. His fan base grew with the success of his songs, like Retiens la nuit, Hold Back the Night in 1962. Johnny quickly became a superstar, singing rock and roll in French. He imposed his repertoire, songs inspired by his U.S. idols, and introduced the entire nation to the twist and the Madison. As one of France's best-selling artists of all time, Johnny Hallyday managed to stage many appearances with the world's greatest, such as Jimi Hendrix, who opened for him at the Olympia venue in 1966. Throughout his career, he surfed on the trends of the time, from soul and blues to rock and roll and pop. France's most popular songwriters of the 80s, like Jean-Jacques Goldman and Michel Berger, wrote for him. In the final years of his career, he could still fill huge stadiums. In 1997, he was awarded France's highest distinction, the Legion of Honor, by the then-president Jacques Chirac.
I also remember the Bercy venue. I came to see you 4 times. Not for the same show. I mean, I love Johnny Hallyday. But let's not push it.
In 2009, his health started deteriorating. After a hospital stay in LA, who forced him to cancel part of his tour, he appeared at the airport looking weak in a wheelchair. Last March, he announced on Twitter he was fighting cancer, but that his life wasn't in danger. To prove it, Johnny went back on tour with the Vieilles Canailles, a group he created with long-standing friends Eddie Mitchell and Jacques Dutronc.
It's not a secret anymore. Everyone knows that I have cancer. But I'm getting treatment and I'm fighting it, and I hope I'll make it. It was important for me to go on this tour because it helps me psychologically.
Johnny never made the big time outside the French-speaking world. In France, though, he's an icon, one of the greatest entertainers ever, a legend. In the heart of his fans, he'll always stay alive, echoing the lyrics of one of his last songs.
And we're joined in the studio by music critic Rochelle Harrison-Pless, film critic Lisa Nesselson, and also French Connections editor Florence Villeminot. Thank you for being here. Now, Flo, we're going to start with you. You're French. It's very hard to explain to non-French people this Johnny phenomenon. Can you try?
Well, Johnny Hallyday, whether you like his music or not, has been part of the cultural landscape for the past 60 years. Perhaps not the most sophisticated part of French culture. It's not the Louvre or Molière, but Johnny Hallyday is just as French as the Eiffel Tower and baguettes. Personally, he's been around my whole lifetime. He's kind of part of the wallpaper, if you will. Even though my parents weren't die-hard fans of Johnny Hallyday, I still knew a lot of his songs. And what's really interesting is this morning at France 24, all the French colleagues have been singing his songs and trying to explain to our Anglo colleagues why he's so important. So, as a token French person, I will try to explain this to you. You really can't overstate how important he is. He's part of the French family, part of the French psyche, if you will, for people my parents' age, for instance. They grew up with Johnny Hallyday, starting with his rock and roll, well, rockabilly years, I guess you could say, turning into rock and roll. It must be said, though, a lot of people love to hate Johnny Hallyday, or perhaps more love to make fun of him, but always with a lot of affection. There's always a lot of affection for Johnny Hallyday. And what's interesting is, even if you're not a big fan, you're always aware of what he's up to, because he's in the magazines all the time. He's in all sorts of advertisements, etc. We just saw that he was on the front page of Paris Match about 80 times. I mean, that's incredible for a French person. And so I guess you could say for a lot of people, particularly people my generation, he's kind of like an uncle, an old uncle that can be a little awkward sometimes, but that you still love and you have a lot of sympathy and affection for, and sometimes want to steal his rock and roll outfits, even though you might not say it out loud. So recently his health had been deteriorating. Everybody was bracing themselves for this to happen. So that's why, even though we were expecting this, everyone's mourning his passing today.
Well, Johnny has millions of fans. Here are some of them.
I can't explain it. I don't know why I loved him. It's a feeling. I loved him. We're fans, but we aren't his family. We're not his friends. But it's as if by seeing him and listening to his music, we became close to him. It's as if we knew him.
I really loved the man. His personality. He was a humble person, a great man, a great star, someone with humility who was there for his friends and his family. A beautiful person.
So, Risha, we heard some of the fans there. He was more than just a recycled Elvis, though, wasn't he?
So much more. When he began his career in 1960, he broke away from the chanson française tradition, introduced rock and roll to French audiences in French, and made what was then a new genre, a new groundbreaking, exciting musical genre popular in France. His 1961 cover of the Chubby Checker hit Let's Twist Again topped the charts across Europe. Another classic song that he covered was Ike and Tina Turner's Proud Mary, which in French became Rouler sur la rivière, which of course is taken from that lyric, Rolling on the River. Let's take a quick listen. So he loved everything about US rock and roll, adopting the clothes and the attitude of his American idols. But he wasn't just limited to reworking English language songs into French. He had his own hits, of course, recording 1,000 songs. He had a massive repertoire over the years, 100 of which he wrote himself. But unlike other French stars that came before and after him, he never cracked the US. That said, he did have many admirers across the Atlantic. I believe we've got some tweets, some reaction on Twitter from a couple of big music stars, one of which who is Lenny Kravitz, who spent some time with Johnny Hallyday. As you can see there, he said, your soul is pure rock and roll. We also heard from Canadian diva Celine Dion. She paid tribute to a giant of show business. So as you can see there, many big stars from across the music world paying tribute today.
Okay, and Lisa, he recorded something like 1,000 songs. But he was also in 30 films or so, wasn't he?
Absolutely, and he was a good performer. He was famous as a singer, but he always wanted to be an actor, and he was serious about it. How serious? Well, roughly 30 years ago, I went to a master class given by the great American director Elia Kazan at the Cinémathèque Française. Sat down, and there was a guy with kind of broad shoulders, sort of blocking my view, and I was going to say, "Excuse me," and then I went, "It's Johnny Hallyday, okay." And he was very attentive. He took notes. Director Patrice Leconte, who directed Johnny in The Man on the Train opposite Jean Rochefort, who also died very recently, put Johnny's ambitions this way.
When it comes to Johnny Hallyday, his strength is that he's always wanted to become an actor. It's a bit like if his musical career was kind of unexpected, a bit like a mishap. And when I had to work with him, I've always treated him as an actor.
And Lisa, he worked with some of the best directors, didn't he?
Absolutely. Our viewers wouldn't recognize all the names, but they would certainly recognize, let's say, Jean-Luc Godard, with whom he made Detective. And he made a film, he was in a film called Jean-Philippe, based on the idea that what would happen if he had never existed. From 2006, it's a parallel universe story about a guy played by Fabrice Lucchini who gets knocked out in a fight, wakes up, and suddenly nobody knows who Johnny Hallyday is. And this is a guy who can sing 900 of his 1,000 songs by heart, has a shrine to him in his home. And so this is very disconcerting for him and for us, since we know he can sell out a stadium. Here's an excerpt.
What's the problem?
Someone stole all my Johnny Hallyday CDs, including the special collector's edition sets.
Whose CDs?
Toute la musique que j'aime, elle vient de là, elle vient du blues.
You're pulling my leg, right?
Something no one's talking about, except I'm about to, is a guilty pleasure from 2003 in which Johnny starred with the likes of Gérard Depardieu and Harvey Keitel. It was called Wanted in French and Crime Spree in English. The first film directed by American screenwriter Brad Merman, and it's about sort of a bumbling heist movie set in Paris and Chicago, and Hallyday speaks English in it. Very entertaining. He also had an entertaining sideline in playing himself because he was so ubiquitous, everybody, could build things around him, including jokes. Earlier this year, he gave advice to Guillaume Canet, playing an actor named Guillaume Canet in Rock and Roll, a very funny and surreal movie written and directed by Guillaume Canet. Here's some parting words from Johnny Hallyday.
Écoute, je vais te dire un truc, Jérôme. Il y a une expression américaine en anglais qui dit « rock and roll is dead ». Ce qui veut dire « le rock and roll est mort ». Mais c'est pas vrai. Le rock and roll n'est pas mort pour ceux qui sont rock et qui ne sont pas morts. Tu comprends? Et tu sais, à part moi, il ne reste plus grand monde.
Johnny Hallyday there. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. Flo and Rochelle, thank you for being here. And we're going to leave you with Johnny on stage, doing what he loved most, performing for his fans at Paris' Stade de France. This is Allumer le Feu. Thanks for joining us. More news coming up on France 24.
Allumer le feu et pas grandir